Oh, well, he was light-hearted, good being to be around, good fun. There was no violence in him.
Willie McKinney was at a march with his brother when he was killed in the street on Bloody Sunday. He filmed these scenes himself just moments before he was shot dead. Unarmed civilians came under fire from British troops. 13 people were killed and at least 15 were injured as they tried to flee on one of the darkest days of the Troubles. 5 decades after shots rang out in Londonderry, families marched to court in Belfast this morning. Only one British soldier, known as Soldier F, has been brought to trial. Today, they watched quietly as he was cleared of murdering William McKinney and James Ray and attempting to murder 5 other people.
Despite the heroism, steadfastness and dignity of the Bloody Sunday families and wounded, a coward walks free from the dock today. Soldier F has been discharged from the defendant's criminal dock, but it is 1 million miles away from being an honourable discharge.
Outside court, old wounds were reopened, but the families took some comfort from the judge's scathing remarks. He said soldiers who shot at unarmed civilians should hang their heads in shame, and that paratroopers had lost all sense of military discipline. But he said the court was constrained and limited because the evidence presented on Soldier F, much of it decades old, fell well short of what was required for a conviction.
Murderers!
There was tension outside court as some who came to support the families heckled those who backed Soldier F.
Shame! Shame!
Soldiers across the United Kingdom will be happy with this, and I hope that there is no more soldiers brought to the courts here and evidence that has actually no way of going through. Thank you.
Bloody Sunday continues to cast shadows far beyond Derry's city walls. This verdict comes weeks after the British and Irish governments announced a new approach to prosecutions into atrocities during the Troubles, committing to fundamentally reform the controversial Legacy Act passed by the Conservatives 2 years ago. Some doubt if this expensive move will help because of problems this case has highlighted with relying on evidence from other former soldiers.
I think it's dead in the water. You know, it's a very bleak thing to say, but I think that the legacy proposals, such as they are entirely ill-fitting towards the problem that victims face in respect to the legacy of the conflict here.
Do you think you will ever see justice?
It won't be for want of trying. We started this campaign in '92 and people told us you'll get nowhere with that. We forced the British government on an inquiry. It sat for 5 years. We forced the Prime Minister, David Cameron, and an apology. It was only one soldier we got on the court, but we got him on the court. And we're not done yet. And what we did and what we achieved has been something else.
So even though this was a not guilty verdict, there's a sense of pride today?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. I can find peace. I can find peace in the fact that what we've done, that we've all done our best. I can find peace there.
The families feel they are on the right side of history, but the case remains. None of those who fired the fatal shots has ever been held to account for what they did. It's unlikely anyone ever will be.
Catherine Sampson reporting from Belfast. Well, the Social Democratic and Labour Party MP Colum Eastwood represents Derry and was in Belfast today to support the families of those who died. He joins me now. Thank you very much for coming on the programme for what must be a very difficult day for you and the people you represent. I mean, after all the years that you've talked to the victims' families, how does today feel?
Well, look, it was very difficult. It was very emotional, actually, in the court. I think in the early stages of the judge's ruling, people were quite hopeful actually, and then the hope was dashed. But you know, these people have been through so much over 53 years. I'm just extremely proud of them, and the whole of Derry is really proud of them. They have put the British government in the dock today, and once again they have proven the case that members of the British Army went into the streets of the Bogside and shot and killed unarmed civilians. That has been proven again today, and you know, even by his own admission in the Savile inquiry, Soldier F was one of those people who shot and killed a number of innocent civilians. So, I mean, there's a victory in that. It's been very difficult, but there's a victory in the world now knowing the truth about what happened on Bloody Sunday.
So you have the truth established, but what about justice? Is this the end of justice?
Well, I think it's the end of this particular road. There may be some other perjury cases because, of course, as we know, a number of those soldiers lied through their teeth. And of course they were supported and protected by the British state for decades. But look, I think today is probably the end of the road in terms of Soldier F. So there was always a fight for truth, but we always wanted justice as well. And I think those people are entitled to justice. But the very fact that the RUC, the police, the British Army and the government colluded over many decades to deny a proper investigation at a time when it would have been useful, not this long after the fact, then that was deliberately done to protect soldiers and deliberately done to deny justice to people who were murdered, as the judge said today, on a British street.
But in the end, time wasn't on the side of justice, as Mr Justice Lynch said himself. And also the evidence just wasn't there to prove Soldier F's guilt beyond reasonable doubt. That is the way the process works.
Yes, and of course that's the truth. And the problem was we were relying on the evidence of two proven liars. We were relying on the evidence that couldn't be trusted, the evidence of two of the soldiers who themselves were involved in shooting and killing people on that particular day. Of course, we have to remember that the weapons that were used on Bloody Sunday all mysteriously went missing. Much of the evidence that would have been available to the RUC at the time, if they had properly investigated this after the fact, all disappeared. And the MOD and the British government did everything they could possibly do to deny these people truth and justice. But I think the world now sees that. And I think there's lessons all around the world for those people striving for truth and justice, that if they keep going, they can achieve momentous things.
Northern Ireland itself has, of course, moved on since the Good Friday Agreement. How do you persuade the relatives of the victims to move on? Or should one not even ask that?
Well, look, everybody wants to move on. These people have wanted to move on for 53 years. They have been denied that right. They've been denied that peace by a state and a system that wanted to do everything to block them just the simple access to truth and justice that any citizen of any country should be entitled to. So of course people want to move on, but we can't move on the basis of a lie. We can't move on the basis of telling people you're not entitled to know the truth about what happened to your loved one, what was done to you by supposedly your own government. So I think the best way for us to properly reconcile as a society is for us to do that on the basis of truth. Right. And justice where possible. We all know justice is difficult, but truth is at least attainable.
Okay, and just very briefly, the Labour Party has said, the government has said, it's keeping alive the possibility of more prosecutions on both sides of the conflict. I mean, do you hold out any hope for that, or is that also going to be a lost leader?
Well, I think in some cases there will be new evidence that has come forward. We've already seen that with some other cases, more recent cases. But the problem actually is, for any soldier that committed murder between 1970 and 1974, the way in which they were interviewed by the Royal Military Police, without, they weren't interviewed under caution, they had no legal representation, and most of them, those investigations were stitch-ups anyway. That has sullied that evidence, and that's what happened in this case and some other cases. So in that period of time, I think it's going to be very difficult.
Colum Eastwood, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. He was a Defence Minister under Theresa May and chaired the Defence Select Committee until 2023. He also served in Northern Ireland as a soldier during the 1990s. He's in the studio now. Tobias Ellwood, it's good to see you. Your reaction to today's verdict?
Well, let's start from the top and say this was one of the darkest days in the British Army's modern history. And it's quite right that there was that Savile inquiry that led to Prime Minister David Cameron making that apology, making it very clear that these were unarmed civilians that were shot upon. My concern now that we've had this result, which has gone the same way as the other half dozen, I think, similar cases, is that we're seeing aging veterans, their doors knocked on, pulled into the courts to see a case then unfold, and then they be acquitted, or it just falls apart, as we've seen.
Do you think
here.
that's an injustice to them?
What I'm saying is that when you look at the Good Friday Agreement, which was that truth and reconciliation moment, the opportunity to draw that line, if I can complete this point, where hundreds of terrorists, IRA terrorists, were let free after serving a couple of years, who'd committed multiple murders. And that was part of the process, difficult though it was for the victims' families, in the same way that now decades have moved on, that we do need to draw a line. Also, from an operational perspective, if we have youngsters joining the British Army now, would they be concerned about what they did in an operational environment if they thought they might be pulled up to charge decades later?
But this is also about 13 unarmed civil rights protesters who were gunned down, on the streets of their city. Do you share the pain, as a former soldier, of the victims' families?
Of course, everybody will. But as we've seen today, along with those other 6 cases that I mentioned, the evidence is not there. The question is why there weren't opportunities previously, much closer to the event itself, to bring these people to justice.
Well, we just heard Colum Eastwood. He said it was either a whitewash, or
yes,
the government fiddled
errors,
the evidence or whatever.
There certainly were errors. There was also a part of the Good Friday Agreement itself, which should have acknowledged that not only dealing with those who are in prison, that you could not bring future charges as well. Because you're absolutely right. They are not feeling that they've had their moment, and then this drags out and prevents Northern Ireland from moving forward from what has been a very, very difficult part of their
But the really sad thing
history.
here is that the truth about this is that justice has a sell-by date.
That is the case. And you see this in other parts of the world where there's been a civil war and you are trying to move forward. And those difficult decisions have to be made as to when you then say, it's not possible to hold people to account because the evidence simply isn't there. What we heard from the judge is that the people don't exist anymore because they've died, the evidence is no longer there, or it cannot be relied upon. And that is what happens. So there needs to be a process which is now in place, I should say. We see this from Afghanistan, where if something does happen in the field, it can be brought to justice far swifter than what we saw here in Northern Ireland.
And as a member of the Unionist Party, as someone who served in Northern Ireland, as someone who believes in the whole place hanging together, are you worried that this verdict today could open old raw wounds and actually imperil the Union?
This is what we need to appeal to all sides of the aisle here, to all sides of the argument here, to say, look at what you've gone through. It's going to be difficult on both sides. We need to draw a line. And understandably, this is a very raw day for those individuals themselves. But let's bear in mind all those others who, part of the Good Friday Agreement that I made mention to, never got their time to hold to account those individuals. They're now free. Multiple murderers are now free because of the Good Friday Agreement. There is nothing easy on any side of this equation.